see.
What? Oh no!
Good morning and welcome to the February 24th, 2020 workshop of the Orlando City Council. We had some work done servicing our HVAC power sources over the weekend and shut all the power down, and it did something with the technology in the council chamber, so we're doing the best we can this morning, but the information to be conveyed will still be in good shape. So we are a city that embraces diversity and equality. We do that in our community, but we also do that with our city workforce, and I think we're pretty representative of our community in just about every department. But traditionally, fire departments around America are not as diverse as some of the other pieces of city and county government. So we want to work on that. So I've asked staff to put together an inclusivity and equity action plan for the fire department, and we have been researching and outreaching and working on that for over a year. So Chief of Staff Heather Fagan and Public Safety Advisor Dave Arnott are here to present the plan.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you, Mayor Dyer. As Mayor Dyer said, thanks to your leadership, Orlando has long been a leader in advancing policies and practices that ensure diversity and inclusion. And unfortunately, over the last year, there's been a few incidents within the fire department that has really highlighted the fact that we need to improve the department, ensure that it's a place where everyone, including minorities and women and veterans, can prosper and thrive and grow. And so the mayor asked us to look at some other jurisdictions and do some research to determine how we could put together some recommendations to make the Orlando Fire Department more diverse and inclusive. While we have a proud history of the Orlando Fire Department leading the country with accreditations and certifications, if they want to continue being one of the most elite in the country, they also have to be reflective of the community that they serve. And unfortunately, as we look across the country, departments are not that inclusive and diverse. And you can see nationwide, about 7 to 8% of departments are made up of blacks, and 4%, there's some up to maybe 7, 8, 9, depending on the state, are made up of women. And so within the fire industry, there's a real lack of minorities and women and veterans serving. And our numbers are pretty much within OFD aligned with that. And so Mayor Dyer asked us to build on some initiatives that were already happening throughout the city. There has been some work in this area ongoing. There was a women's summit held. There's been inclusiveness training. There's been changes to our anti-harassment policies and physical changes made to the existing fire departments, and then plans adjusted on the new stations that are in the works to be built. But in addition to this, when the mayor tasked Dave and I with this effort, we first sat down with the fire department, from the deputy chiefs to the union to various individuals who reached out to us to want to talk about what's happening within the fire department, so that Dave and I could really get an understanding of the current practices within the department. We also met with the counterparts within OPD and met with Orange County Sheriff's Office, met with the Valencia Public Safety Institute. We researched what's happening in a number of jurisdictions across the country and read the international IAFF's diversity report as well. And that really led us to focusing on a couple of areas within the department and narrowing our scope. And so our report is really focused on recruitment and then retention, which is really the professional standards area, that you have to have effective policies, training, and internal investigations and discipline in order to retain the firefighters that you keep. And so once we had built a framework of recommendations and a focus area, Dave and I went out and met with the firefighters in the department. And we did that with then interim fire chief, Chief Wales, and the union president, Ron Glass. And we went to one station in each district. We had 7 meetings. We ended up having to cancel one of them because of Hurricane Dorian, but it was the last one, and we thought we had enough consistent feedback to move forward without having another one. But we did decide to add one specifically for the women. We felt like they were underrepresented in the initial forums that we had at the fire stations, and had one where only the female firefighters were invited, and 13 of them attended in what ended up being about a 2-hour session. All of the sessions really had some recurring themes. Number one, there's a lot of pride in the department, and they did not want to lower the standards or qualifications to become an Orlando firefighter, which is a commitment that we share. They also desired more professionalism within the department, consistency in how investigations were done and discipline was issued. And also recognizing the fact that currently we're only hiring certified firefighters, and that we should really be looking to broaden that pool and hire non-certified firefighters. So looking at places like college athletics and CrossFit gyms and a variety of other places that would be natural fits for the Orlando Fire Department. And so the recommendations that we have today are broken down into two areas: recruitment and professional standards. So I'm going to go through the highlights of the recruitment, and then Dave will talk through the professional standards. We're going to just talk about the highlights today. All of the recommendations are in the report, which you guys have in front of you. So currently, recruitment within the Orlando Fire Department is very reactive. There's not a proactive strategy for recruitment, and that's really because there's not a lot of turnover and attrition, so there's currently not a lot of vacancies, and there's 1,000 people applying for those jobs, so there's not a shortage of applicants. So there really hasn't been a need to spend the financial resources on recruitment. And as I said, we're currently only hiring certified firefighters, which limits the pool that the Orlando Fire Department is pulling from. So in the short term, as this was ongoing, there actually was a hiring cycle that was starting in the summer. And this allowed us a chance to pilot a couple of efforts to determine what the response would be. And so prior to that hiring, we put together a recruitment team of 6 firefighters from the Orlando Fire Department. And they went out and they sought to really seek out the veterans, minorities, and women that were already in the Valencia School or other schools around the area, already certified and looking to become Orlando firefighters. They also put together flyers that were representative of the department and went out to try to be proactive. And you can see here, we increased the number of female applicants over previous years just by putting a focused effort on recruitment, even though we were still hiring certified firefighters. So putting an effort on recruitment proved to work in the immediate phase. Additionally, an effort that was underway was to change a portion of the civil service test. And it was changing to a video-based process, which one, not only made it easier to implement, but also allowed us to test a broader skill set. So firefighting has become more complex in recent years. They're no longer just responding to fires, they're responding to complex medical incidents, they're having to respond to situations like pulse. And so in order to be an effective firefighter, we need to test skills like social skills and interaction skills and community leadership. And so this new test would allow for applicants to test in those areas and additional technical firefighting skills. And you can see with the change in the test in 2019, over previous years, there was an increase of both females and then Black and Hispanic males. As we want to do an increase in veterans, we're tracking that now moving forward, but we didn't really track that much in the past, so we don't have comparative numbers to really look at veterans in that area. So we would propose continuing to look at these tests and evaluating them to increase the applicant pool that is coming in the short term while we're hiring certified firefighters. However, as we look to midterm recommendations 3 to 5 years away, one of the things that was talked about a lot within the forums and is a best practice around the country is hiring non-certified firefighters. As I said, the Orlando Fire Department hasn't had a large number of vacancies over the past few years, but as we build up to 2025, we're expecting a large number of retirements to start. And so that would be a good time to start. Now is a good time to start developing programs that help us attract non-certified when we're ready for the hiring in 2025. And we have a number of initiatives underway that we can build on. We already have an Explorer program within the city, and then we also have the civilian EMTs and paramedics. We have in the past leveraged the cadets. We actually have 2 assistant chiefs within the department right now that were part of the cadet program many years ago, prior to going back to hiring non-certified. And then in order to manage that whole process, we think that we need to start creating an office with a lieutenant or some kind of ranked firefighter to oversee that effort and really be more proactive and bringing forward non-certified firefighters. Over the long term, we think that we should actually create a full recruitment office similar to what OPD has, so that we can be proactive not just in firefighting, but also the other positions that are within the department, from the communications dispatchers to other, from the civilian and civilian EMTs and paramedics as well. You can see here, this was one of the new pieces that was created this go around on the recruitment effort. And so once we recruit them, the focus is on retaining them. And so I'm going to ask Dave to talk about the professional standards.
Mayor, Commissioners, good morning. One of the most impressive things about this opportunity was our involvement and encouragement and positive attitude from all the firefighters. As Heather said, we met with a lot of people. We met with some individually, and we met in large groups. And we initially thought there might be some pushback or something like that, but everybody was eager to see how we can make this fire department better. They were thankful that you all, invested enough in them, take the time to send somebody from the executive offices out to meet with them, which I think really showed that we care. The functions of a professional standard division are critical to the overall function of any public safety agency. Making sure all of the OFD policies are consistent not only with city policies, but also are clearly understood and acknowledged by every firefighter employee. That's very important. As you can see in the report, many of these responsibilities currently lie within different areas of the fire department, managed by different deputy chiefs. Training and educational opportunities, as we know, the Orlando Fire Department, one of the best in the nation. It's got the ISO rating, but we need to also look at what professional development we can offer them. Short term, there was a lot of recommendations. We narrowed it down to 15. Today we're highlighting 3 of them for you. Policy Review Committee. A committee that includes members of the department from all ranks, formed to review existing policies, recommend changes, and updates that will give leadership and professional involvement in the department. If you're involved in the developing of your policies, you have the opportunity to review those policies. It will enhance your leadership. Operationally, fighting fires are amazing. Rescuing people are amazing. We need to get them into these leadership opportunities. Mentoring and peer support. Simply put, it's taking ownership of your own employees. The senior members, the high-ranking members need to be working with everybody to make sure we're helping them develop career paths. How do I become the fire chief? Leadership opportunities and understanding of the department's goals and objectives. Supervisor training and educational opportunities. Professional development training and advanced educational opportunities. We heard that a lot. For example, when you promote a new lieutenant, which is their first line of supervision with the largest amount of people that they supervise that deal with the public on a day-to-day basis, making sure those lieutenants receive formal educational training, not just on-the-job leadership from the other lieutenant who may be only 3 months senior to you. Training on topics such as supervision, budgets, evaluations, community and cultural concerns that will make sure as they rise in the ranks, they bring those positive traits with them. Our midterm recommendations, again, there was 4 of those. We're going to highlight 3 of them for you today. We believe in establishing an Office of Professional Standards. House it all in one place that will manage all the policies, ensuring they are up to date and are being acknowledged by the employees. Oversee training to ensure it's not only compliant operationally, but also taking into account professional development. It would also house the internal investigation component that you'll hear about shortly. This isn't reinventing the wheel. This model currently exists in many public safety agencies, most notably at the Orlando Police Department. Assigning a district chief or an assistant chief over this office would provide another leadership position that will cultivate more leaders within the department. Creating a professional development program of all levels of leadership. OFD's already begun to work on that. They've already started some officer academy training programs. In the past, they've had a program called the Gold Program. That was grant funded. So researching opportunities to bring things like that back. But again, ensuring all ranks, especially those ranking, supervising the firefighters that deal with the public day to day, are receiving that professional training. How do we find that? How do we pay for that? That's always going to be the question. Our new hire orientation, it's important that we have inclusion and diversity training in that right away. Let's meet them when we hire them and make sure every employee understands how important this is to the entire department. Training, again, going into dedicated to leadership. We need to look at training opportunities for leadership. Is there a cost? Yes, there could be some cost, but we have to explore options such as bringing training courses here to Orlando, utilizing grant opportunities, working with other city departments that could benefit from similar training. Personally, I see in this room a lot of leaders, a lot of city department leaders that could help with that training, that could be part of orientations, that could be part of things that could show that. Internal investigations. Early on during our fact-finding mission, we heard from the OFD leadership, the union leadership, and several firefighters we met with individually in groups that strong need for consistent investigations. Currently, complaints are sent to the Assistant Chief in Field Operations that determines if a complaint warrants an investigation. If an investigation is needed, it is handled by the SIS, which is our Arson Bomb Squad investigators. Once that investigation is complete, the Deputy Chief of Operations receives the results and makes a discipline recommendation. On a 3-year average, they've had 9 formal investigations and 133 informal investigations. Overall, they don't have a lot of trouble. They don't have a lot of issues that they deal with. Short-term recommendations for the internal investigations. A couple of them are already underway. As you can see, the slide, the creation of a civilian internal affairs office with a dedicated OFD internal investigator to ensure all investigations are consistent, transparent, and the discipline is consistent. Since this is such an important element, steps were put in place by staff to budget for this position, and things are underway to establish this position. How this will work once it's finalized: Public Safety Internal Affairs section will be created that will encompass OPD and OFD internal investigations. This new office will integrate OPD's internal investigation team with a new dedicated OFD investigator. It creates an independent investigation model similar to many other fire departments across the country. All complaints, internal or external, are filed with the Public Safety Internal Affairs Manager, who currently oversees OPD Internal Affairs. The investigation will be assigned to the OFD investigator for a formal investigation or referred to the OFD chain of command for informal counseling. These positions are not involved in discipline, only investigations to determine a finding. Once OFD civilian investigator determines a finding, the discipline decisions will be sent to the OFD chain of command in accordance with the current collective bargaining agreement. So why do we house OFD at OPD? Well, first off, at this time, it enables us to provide immediate support to clerical and investigative needs. There's rooms where they do recordings, there's people for transcribing statements, etc. Therefore, we can start this right away without having to fund a very large, expensive thing, and we can build up to possibly moving it back long-term, moving it back to OFD under the Office of Professional Standards. And finally, to ensure all members of the fire department are comfortable filing harassment complaints such as sexual harassment, bullying, they will be reported directly to the Public Safety Internal Affairs Manager. This is a current practice at the Orlando Police Department, and it makes it much easier on a person wanting to file a complaint who may be fearful of reporting it to a direct supervisor. And I'll turn it back over to Heather.
As you all know, we recently had the privilege of hiring a new fire chief, and throughout that process, this initiative was ongoing. And so identifying a fire chief who had a commitment to inclusion and had demonstrated a track record of implementing programs similar to these that we've talked about was a priority for us, and that was part of the selection process for Chief Barksdale. And so moving forward, Chief Barksdale will be responsible for implementing this plan. He'll report his progress quarterly to Mayor Dyer and provide ongoing communication updates to the department. Their involvement is critical to the success, and then create an ongoing report on the status of the action plan. So as you can see, there were a number of efforts that we focused on. I think increasing community engagement, making the department more aware of opportunities within the fire department, getting the fire department out to a variety of events will help further ensure the department's more reflective of the community, creating a pipeline of future applicants, starting with high school or earlier with the Explorer programs, and creating a seamless pathway for them to understand how to become an Orlando firefighter and be trained in the ways of the Orlando Fire Department, and ensuring that throughout that process the hiring is reflective of all of the skill sets that it takes to be an Orlando firefighter, and then ensuring that we have the policies in place to keep professionalism within the department and enforce that with the discipline process. We had a lot of discussion at the forums about, goals and how do we achieve this within the department. And there was a lot of discussion on, should we say we want X amount of women or X amount of minorities? And ultimately, we decided that that was something that wasn't wanted, because a lot of people felt like that would just be a check mark and we move on. But instead, by implementing new policies, procedures, and programs, that we could really start to change the culture of the department and ensure that it's always a place that people can thrive and prosper in. And so we didn't set those goals, but rather set metrics that we think can really start to change the culture of the departments. And so with that, we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Dave. Well done. I know a lot of time and effort was put into this, so we appreciate that. And also, Ron, I want to thank you personally for participating and being a part of the process. I know you attended all the meetings and were very influential throughout the process, so appreciate that. Commissioner Sheehan.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello? Thank you, Mayor. I like everything that you laid out. I think y'all were very, very thorough. The one concern that I have, though, is that on some of the issues that have come forward, and I'm not sure if I'm getting the wording right, but when things get appealed through the union to, is it a hearing officer? Mm-hmm. The hearing officers have come out with some really crazy decisions. Is there any way to make sure that the hearing officers are trained on this proper procedures, so that they're not making, after we go through this entire process of making sure that there's justice, because if there's no justice, no peace, that then the hearing officer throws everything out the window because of his or her personal biases that are directly in direct opposition to what our policies are.
Those are arbitrators?
Arbitrators, sorry.
They don't work for the city?
Yep.
And
Step back to the mic, Dave.
But having said that, we have been having conversations with legal and Jody about how to address that piece of it. Our work didn't really focus on that because we were trying to look at policies and procedures that we could control.
Yeah.
But we are working to try to figure out a process with the hearing officers so that.
And the arbitrators, I think there needs to be a training with the arbitrators to make sure that they understand our policies and are making sure they are implemented, because we could put all the great policies in place, but then someone calls somebody a epithet, which has happened to Hispanic and African American firefighters. People mistreat women, and they go to an arbitrator and they get nothing. So that's my concern. We could put all the policies in place that we, want to, but at the end of the day, if they have the right to appeal to an arbitrator who may not be a person who understands or shares our values, I have a concern that that could be a problem. So again, I think these are great processes to put in place. But we also need to look at the end result, and I'm sure our legal department will work. But I do think our arbitrators need to go through a training process too, as part of this, so that they can't say, well, I didn't understand your procedures or policies, or I don't understand why women, shouldn't just deal with being treated like that, or why calling someone names is acceptable. Because some people, unfortunately, in this world, think that using racial epithets and calling women names are acceptable. I don't think it's acceptable. I don't think anybody on this panel thinks it's acceptable, but I've seen some outrageous decisions made, and I want to make sure that that training is consistent, because at the end of the day, I can't speak for my colleagues, but my desire is to not see this happening in the future, because it's disgraceful. And we're not going to get qualified people to apply if they're going to be called names, and if they're going to be denigrated, and if they're going to be treated badly. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Hill.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I had some other things to say, but since Commissioner Sheehan did bring that up, is that I think that is the first front line when we start talking about inclusion and changing the culture and behaviors of any fire department. In our fire department, thank you, Ron, for your leadership. Especially, I like to thank Chief Bartsdale, and I'll come back to the arbitrator piece, but I want to commend this firefighting team by all the efforts that they have made in the last month and a half. Mayor, we have had over 4 fires there in the Paramore area, and the men and women of OFD fought those fires valiantly in excellence and superiority, no casualties, and I just would like to commend the men and women of OFD. And there has been a transformational change that I have seen here in the last year, and I just want to say thank you to your team, which is our team. and because it's done with teamwork. And change is never easy, and we all know that, whether in our households, with our own families, or with our families here in the system. So I do see progress, and we have to at least acknowledge that. And thank you for all those efforts for the last year or so by going out into the community and getting input, and then working with the team to at least put a plan together. But as Commissioner Sheehan said with the arbitration thing, none of this matters if there's appeal and it goes to the arbitrators, which are, she says, training. Well, this is going to sound pretty harsh, and it's nothing to do with age, and I don't want to seem as if I'm discriminating, but most of those arbitrators are retired judges in their late 70s that are white men. That makes a difference, because they are somewhat have their biases. And I don't know if, you know, I have a grandmother, and I can't, God knows I can't change her thoughts, and she's, you know, some people just set in their ways, whether it's right or wrong, you know? So I do think we do need to put something in place, and I have also been speaking with yourself, Heather, Jody, and also our team regarding what can the city actually put in place? How can we bring in, as we're saying, new blood to actually, or is there some civilians? Is there a civilian committee that we can bring about that kind of judge on some of this appeal process? So I know those are in the works. I know Ron is there in the conversation, him in the union, and we want to be fair to all entities. And so I look forward to that conversation. There was I do like the fact that you guys are kind of changing the civil service test, because for many, many decades, I heard from minority firefighters and police officers that many times these civil service tests really doesn't understand our culture, and that's where the divide happens. So to see that you all are working on that is great. There was something that I saw where you have a 0 to 3 year plan, and then a 3 to 4 year plan. And it was stated, but I saw it in the 3 to 4 year. Dave said that it would happen immediately, but here on the projector, you said 3 to 4. And I think that the not just the new hires should be orientated to a culture sensitivity and all those things. I think all employees need at least a 8-hour sensitivity workshop, and that should be immediately. I mean, we should put that in planning as soon as this workshop is finished, to where we also do internal culture. That's where the problem lies. It's not with those that haven't been hired yet, but those that are already in the system. So we can start looking at something, Chief and Heather and Mayor and Council, to where we immediately do some culture sensitivity training and inclusivity, because, you know, we have to be realistic here. Nobody wants anyone coming for their job. You know, and we are comfortable in our places sometimes, and we look at the next person's competition. So if we can do that, and I can, the fire department and OPD have been doing a great job when it comes to community building. They're always out there at different events, OFD and OPD. I think we should continue that behavior. I don't see us lagging behind in that. And as you know, I think even the council, including myself, might try to get to know our the fire departments in our district a little bit more and build that relationship. I can say for myself, it was a tumultuous couple years when it came to my relationship with OFD, but I can say that we have improved on that with myself and Ron and the union working, and I'm very appreciative of that, and I really appreciate the work that our fire department do. And with that being said, I'm glad to see this initiative moving forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. And am I on? Yeah. And I appreciate the work that's gone into this. Thank you, Ron, for your leadership. Thank you, Heather, and those that are involved in it. A couple of quick questions I want to share with you, but I want to also go a little bit on what Commissioner Sheehan has said. There's two ways to set policy. One is to set it reactively, and one is to set it proactively. I think this is an attempt to set it proactively. But the challenge is that when things are challenged and it gets to an arbitrator and they choose a different path than what we have, it creates another policy setting, and you're setting policy there reactively. So I would love to see, I'm not sure we can tell an arbitrator what to do or who we can pick. That's a difficult thing to do. But I do think that we ought to make sure that our policies do fall into that general category in a proactive way. So we haven't got to be in that position. That would be my point. Internal investigation. Share with me a little bit more about the structure, about how the internal investigations, how you do it today, and then how you're proposing that we move forward.
How it's done today, or how it's being done right now, is just it goes to the deputy chief. They determine if an investigation is warranted, and then it gets sent over to, which you probably know, the arson bomb investigators, the guy that work a lot of the fires that the commissioner just talked about, or any bomb calls. And they're collaterally trained in internal investigation, since they don't have a lot of them. But before it even gets there, it's determined, did a violation occur? And that's where the consistency is running in, because they have Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie shift. If you're on the Alpha, assistant chief, the Bravo assistant chief, and Charlie assistant chief, you might have different opinions on what is a violation. And, it goes back to, that professional development. So you run the consistency, gets shortchanged there. And some people get disciplined harder, some people don't get disciplined at all. Whether it's warranted or not, that creates an unknown, And so by formalizing it, creating an office, putting an investigator in there, that's their job. Those complaints will come over to the OPD manager right now, which is Dwayne Rivers, which has been around for 20 plus years. Has a tremendous background. He worked for the Orange County Public School System in theirs, worked here with us. So he'll receive those complaints. He'll either send them to the fire department for informal handling, or it'll go to the investigator, who will investigate using an accident, for example. Is a person guilty of accident with the fire truck, and is disciplined? So then he sends it back over to OFD, and it goes up the OFD chain in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement on how discipline is handled. But what it does is it removes it from anybody else's opinions, and it sends it to an investigation. It must be looked at. And if you did nothing wrong, you have nothing to worry about. But if you don't have a system in place where it sends it to an investigation, then you run into the challenge of, is discipline consistent? Are we looking at, and you're right, the policies must be robust before we get to the arbitrator. By having an internal affairs investigative system, it ensures that your policies are being followed and being warranted or looked into if you're violating your policies. If you don't have that, the arbitrator can right off the bat say, I don't even see an investigation here. You did an investigation for this one, but you didn't do one for that one. You did one for these two, but you didn't do for these three. So you become inconsistent.
Yeah, that's what I feel like when we talk about these issues. The inconsistency is the biggest concern that I have. That an officer would do one thing and nothing would happen to him, and then another officer on another shift would do the same thing, and he would be disciplined. And what it creates is a change in policy because of how people are reacting and what you're doing to it. Now, you said we had kind of 9 formal investigations and more than 100 informal?
An average.
Okay. So is it your feeling that we will have more inquiry into investigations when we go to a process that's a little bit freer?
Well, first and foremost, the Orlando Fire Department doesn't really get into a lot of complaints. Their interaction with the public is for most parts, very, very good. Internally, following their own policies and stuff like that, that might increase a little bit. It could increase slightly, but that's why we looked at one investigator to start. We don't think it'll increase a lot, but it could increase slightly, but it will guarantee the consistency. And when you look at numbers, if you look at the Orlando Police Department, all these investigations, but like 90% of them, the officers are exonerated or it's unfounded. But at least we can say to the public, we looked into that complaint. I thought the officer did this, said this to me. We looked into it. We looked at the body cam. We interviewed the witnesses and determined they didn't say that to you. So if anybody questions us, we can say we did it. Right now, we don't have that consistency and that backing.
Does it accelerate the time as well? I'm concerned that oftentimes with an investigation, there is a lag time, and the more there's a lag time, the less likely you can get more accurate information. So having something come to internal affairs effectively, does that accelerate this process so that what's happening is more timely?
Well, legal will work with the union and the fire administration to determine. I mean, OPD has timelines they have to meet, so we would hope those similar timelines that would be in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement would be met, but it could accelerate it. It's important to accelerate where you can accelerate, because the longer things lag, that's when all the rumors happen, all the questions happen.
Well, I mean, timeliness is important because it does a lot of things, but if it's discipline, you want discipline to be determined quickly, and you want to move forward. If it's something that needs to be exonerated, you want to exonerate it right away and get on with our lives. I mean, those are important.
Yes, sir.
Let me change the subject with you. The civil service test. If somebody will share with me offline, haven't got to share it here, but we have the ability to adjust the civil service test based upon the type of applicant that we're looking for. Is that correct? I never quite understood that.
Well, we're adjusting it. It was a written test before, so we adjusted it to be a video-based test that tests a broader set of skill sets. And so it's been approved. It's used by hundreds of departments around the country, police and fire. And then we got involvement from Ron and then Chief
But
Wales.
it's a standardized test. It is evolving, so we're taking advantage of that evolution. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
OPD had been using it, and one of the problems with the paper test is, after a while, other people may have that paper test. So is it the most fair test? And also, the video test, we can take it anywhere. So when we go to non-certified world, if we wanted to go to Tallahassee, to Gainesville, we could take the video test with us, which is what OPD does. But like Heather said, we looked at, we worked with HR and the CAO's office and legal to look at other questions that, community involvement, professional development, were you an Eagle Scout? Those type of things, and that type, just not straight fire skills questions, because the next part of the exam, or the next part of the hiring process is the firefighter skills and all that type of stuff. But we did, Ron got to view the test, and Deputy Chief Wales did, and it has the ability to add or subtract to it. But we felt it, like OPD, it offered a better opportunity for a broader spectrum of people.
Yeah.
It didn't lower any standards. It's still, for those of you that have been in the military, ever been in the military, or ever, other places, it's a similar test.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think we're on the right track, and we want to keep moving down that process. And we want to be aggressive about making sure that everybody's been treated fairly and that the process works well for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burns.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Heather and Dave, for your work on these strategies. I wanted to focus and hear a little bit more about the equity piece of these strategies. Because when we talk about equity, it's not just leveling the playing field, but identify where there may be a need for additional resources in different groups. And with that, did you all identify any reasons why there was an underrepresentation of minorities and women on the fire department?
I mean, it's really something that's spoken to nationwide, and there's been a variety of initiatives underway, and they've been slow to make progress nationwide. So I think there's aspects of it that are less attractive to females. For example, the 24-hour work shifts are challenges for some people. But I think really it's just been that the industry has such a long history, and there hasn't been a need to go beyond. They've been doing well with what they're doing, and there's been the applicants and there's been people applying, and they've been great departments, so there hasn't been the need to look externally, and just hasn't been the focus on it. And so I think with the focus, you can see already in the short term, there's been an increase just by actually putting focus and energy on it, which just hasn't occurred in the past.
Right, so as far as the equity, because you know the plan is inclusivity and equity. Can we just talk about the equity piece, and are there some identified action steps that address equity in this process?
Do you mean, like by increasing the numbers or, sorry?
Yeah, I mean, are there some additional resources that may be devoted to the minority and women population to?
The recruiting team,
Yes.
recruiting team specifically,
Yep.
Commissioner, the goal by establishing, if you can see those, the 0 to 3 and the 3 to 5, a recruiting team can now, right now there's not a human body in the building that's going out and, looking to, in anywhere for any specific, we're just turning on it's open sign and people are applying.
People coming in, so
So by having that recruiting team, and that recruiting team that was established, the one that we kind of threw together, was reflective of the community. There was African Americans, Hispanics, females, males, senior people, junior people, veterans on there that were out there. They were, we're hiring, and then mentoring. A lot of agencies, they mentor people. This test. The test may be harder for me. I can tell you I was a terrible test taker, so I can tell you, the test may be harder for me than it is for you. So it's a mentoring program. I will tell you, it's very nice. The union brought their Human Relations Council today with us today. They're working too to try. It's nationwide, predominantly white, population. It's not a bad thing. It is what it is. So when we're in that pool, we're having to look outside that pool. That's why the non-certified is so very important.
thank you.
Commissioner Ortiz?
There we go. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I have a few technical things I want to cover first. This demographics does not have Latinos in it. Any particular reason for it?
Well, it has, just because the numbers are fairly small, so they're tied into the other, you mean the OFD ones?
Yes.
Yeah, because they're tied into the other demographics right now, so.
Okay, well, I like to see that because that tells us
Smaller,
exactly where
yeah.
we are in reference
Yeah,
to the
we'll pull that
population.
number for you.
And the other thing is the Hispanic word does not include Brazilians, so we use Latinos more often. So that way we include everybody who is of Latino origin. In terms of the, let me move along here. In terms of a pool of firefighters to be created or whatnot. I don't know if you guys remember, a few years ago we created the Central Florida Public Service College and Career Readiness Program with Valencia College. And recently they're already working on moving the tower to Valencia, the tower that has been at Mid-Florida Tech, which is something that's coming up in order for them to complete their training facility at Valencia College. But they've already been creating a pool, so we should be in close contact with Valencia College, Dr. Gold, which is a peer of ours. He's on top of this, and they're creating a magnificent pool of not only police officers, but firefighters and correctional officers. So this should be an easy one for us.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
I'm surprised and I'm taken by the fact that now we are creating an internal investigation department, a policy review committee for the fire department, because this is something I always expected to have, just like the Orlando Police Department. These are bodies that need that in order to survive, because we need to be reviewing the policies. But since we're talking about policy, I'm going to suggest that we do this for every department in the city, because I know that there's other departments that need to have some policy reviews also. And I think this is a time, since we're, when a ball snowballing here, we should take care of that too. I want to congratulate you guys for finally, getting to this, because this is something that should have been put in place. And the last thing I want to include is the fact that on this particular matters, we work hand in hand with the Orlando Police Department. So we mimic the ways that we have on both sides. Both bodies are public service bodies, and I think it should mirror each other in terms of not of the particular service, particular policies in terms of the behavior of our officers. And with that, I think it will make it a lot easier for all of us. I know that this is David, I know that because you're coming from the Orlando Police Department, this is something you understand better than anybody else, and we have our chiefs over here. Thought we did, I saw Chief Rolong. But anyhow, he's a great source also, and I think we should maximize that and take advantage of the Valencia College that offers so much to all of us, so we won't have to reinvent the wheel. And thank you for doing this.
Commissioner, just so you know, we early on, I think it was our third meeting, was Dr. Goltz and his fire academy person, and we met with them probably another 3 or 4 times, and a lot of thanks to the Orlando Police Department and their internal affairs and their recruiting. They met with us a dozen times each too. So, but we did. Jeff Goltz was one of the first phone calls.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gray.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you guys for doing this. Maybe I should have grabbed the mic first and speak, because to me this is a real positive step, and it was probably a year ago that a group of the female firefighters came to me, requested a meeting in a very positive sense. It wasn't litigious. It wasn't that they were threatening to walk out. They simply said, Commissioner, it's our experience that morale's down low. We're not hiring enough female firefighters. We as females care about our department. Would you please push to have us take a look? And certainly I called the CAO's office and HR and asked them. So I think this is a good first step. And we put some points around it, and a little bit of cement around a policy. But like any policy, it's got to be nurtured. It's got to be modified. It's a first step in the right direction, and I think it sends a strong message to certainly the women in the OFD that, yeah, your voice matters, and we're going to deal with it. But look, I wouldn't expect this to be perfect. It's a good update, and we're going to have to continue to work it. But to me, it's all positive. Nobody came to me threatening lawsuits or anything. They cared about the department. They wanted to make it better. So thank you guys for taking the steps to make it better, and we'll keep working on it and improve it. And as Chief Barksdale makes his reports, that'll give us the opportunity to check in and see if we're getting the right kind of feedback and rulings and inclusiveness that we hope to. So thank you for taking the first step. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Back to Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Something I failed to state earlier, and then there was one question, is that I will have the privilege to meet with Chief Barksdale in a couple more weeks, where something that he did over in Washington that was pretty innovative when it came to dual enrollment. And I know, Mayor, you're super stoked on training. And so we're going to see if we can put that vocational training for students and graduates together with our Blueprint program. So I'm excited about that, and I look forward to meeting with you, Chief, to see if we can implement that, which was so successful there in Virginia for yourself. But there was a question when it comes to, I heard you saying that very few of our firefighters are retiring, and that's when a employment opportunity opens and then some advancements. And in the same vein as this vocational piece that hopefully me and Chief Barksdale can work with OCPS with. And the population has grown tremendously, and it's still growing here in the Central Florida area, and especially in the city of Orlando with Hurricane Maria and now the earthquake, Commissioner Ortiz, and we're getting more of a population. Is there anything, Chris or Heather, that's in our budget to where we're going to have an opportunity to hire more firefighters or EMTs, just as we've had to hire more police officers to compensate for the influx of new residents in the city?
I know one of the things the chief is doing in his new role is understanding the growth and where future need is going to be, but I'm not sure if we have it where we are in the budget process. I don't know if Chris or Kevin know. We haven't been focused on the future growth really, but I'm sure there are.
Morning, Mayor, Commissioners, how are you? We constantly look at that, Commissioner, as we go through the process and as our community continues to grow. We typically add staff as needed, police, fire, and across the board. So, you'll know right now that we're looking at stations down in the southeast because we don't want to get to a point where we have a deficiency there. So we constantly look at that in every budget process. The good luck that our community is continuing to grow, that we're still on the right side of the economic analysis is good for us, so we'll continue to look at that as we go through the process. And I think that Heather and Dave will tell you that we've been very receptive in including things in the budget that we need to implement this particular plan. So I look forward to moving forward with this. I think that from a perspective, from the CAO's perspective, I think we will continue to do the things that we have to do to make sure our community is safe.
I know this is priority of public safety. And one thing, just a thought. This morning when I woke up, I was alarmed and saddened. I think it was over in the Apopka area where there was a house fire and the occupants was able to get out safe with their pets, but there was no hydrant within a mile radius of their neighborhood. Is there opportunity at some point for us to do some type of survey to make sure in our neighborhoods or within that we do have a fire hydrant that's connected to our neighborhoods? Because I'm certain maybe Orange County did not know when these developments are being built that hazard was there, and it's pretty alarming for me this morning to know that a house burned down with.
Commissioner, that's part of the ISO process where your fire hydrants are located and the pressure, and those are tested all the time.
Okay.
Our guys do a really good job.
And one of the
testing
reasons
this.
we have
Yeah.
ISO 1 is because of our water distribution system.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Sheehan.
I just had one quick follow-up, and I think, it might be time for some citywide diversity training, because I remember the last time we did diversity training, it was a great program at Valencia, and they made us, and it was right after Pulse, and I'm like, I don't have time for this, but I need to do this because I pushed so I pushed so hard for it, I can't, be a leader and not do it. So I went to it, and of course I was late, and it's part of my charm. And they put me in a group with some older white guys from facilities, and I'm thinking, no, from fleet, and I'm like, oh man, here I'm going to hear it, right? They were talking about toxic masculinity and their feelings and stuff like that. By the end of it, we were all like hugging and they were crying, and it was amazing. It was one of the most amazing experiences for me, because what I thought it was going to be when I got put in this group was completely different than what it ended up being, and I think we really shared a lot, and it was really important. I mean, just not for me as a city employee, but as a human being. So I think when we have these opportunities, especially the Valencia training, it's really good. And any of my colleagues who, I would say that we need to do this, more than every 3 years, or more when there's just a crisis or something like this, because as much as I looked at it and I'm like, man, I got so much to do right now, I don't have time for this, it really was transformational and important.
Yeah.
And not just to do it with people in your own agency. I know police and fire tend to be more insular. I think it's important as we do the diversity training, especially since we've got some diversity challenges in these departments, is to have it be more citywide and have people from all different, groups coming together to just talk, because we don't do that enough, I don't think. We don't connect enough, and I think that's part of the problem. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner, and Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to reiterate, Commissioner Hill, the dual enrollment, that's what the Central Florida Public Service College and Career Readiness Program is. It's dual enrollment and career pathways for our kids. So it's been established for years already. So
I'm gonna put it on steroids.
Yeah.
Because it's not working for us.
No.
Because we would have, in all due respect, Commissioner, if it was working for minorities, we would not have the statistics that we have. So they do have it, but what is the focus? So I'm going to focus on making sure we fill that gap.
Commissioner, there's other elements to fill. That's what the fire department, and that's why recruiting is, and for example, the cadets and all those programs are so important in order to match those. But they are doing a great job over there. So.
Okay, I'm going to help them out.
Thank you. We appreciate it. That's it, man. Thank you.
Okay, well done, and Chief, hand it off to you. All right, that concludes our workshop for today.